The envelope landed on my porch like a threat tossed by an enemy. I tore it open with the same hand holding my father's old coffee mug, and the number at the bottom almost made me drop it. $250,000. For violations on the land I'd lived on for 24 quiet years. Problem. The HOA said I'd broken their rules. Pain, they wanted my home within 30 days. Promise. They were about to learn whose land they'd been standing on all along. As the morning wind moved through the cedar fence Dad built, something inside me tightened. Not again. They're not taking this place from me. The letter didn't even pretend to be polite. Final notice. Immediate action required. The kind of language meant to make a man panic before he can think. I stepped onto the porch, boots sinking into the gravel. The sun wasn't all the way up yet, and the lake behind my barn still had that soft ripple you only hear before the world wakes up. The HOA president, Marla Kingston, had been sniffing around lately. Sharp jaw, eyes that blinked too fast when she lied, and a voice that always sounded one tone away from yelling. Her signature glared from the bottom of the notice. The list of fines read like satire. Unapproved. Shed. Non-compliant fence material. Authorized. Driveway expansion. Plus late fees. Months worth. I exhaled slowly. 18 months. I never got a single warning. Marla had written the violations with precise GPS coordinates. Coordinates that didn't match my property lines at all. I knew that because I'd grown up walking every inch of this land. Long before these folks painted HOA on a brick wall and called themselves an authority. I went inside, grabbed Dad's old survey map from the cabinet, and laid the HOA's notice right over it. The mistake jumped out immediately. The coordinates they used fell 40 yards outside my legal boundaries. Either they were sloppy, or someone was trying to pull off something bigger than a fine. I drove to the HOA office, that oversized cottage with shiny windows and fake flowers in the pots. Marla sat behind a wide desk like she was running the county, not a neighborhood committee. She didn't greet me. She didn't smile. She just tapped her pen like she was already bored. "You're here to arrange payment," she said. "No," I replied softly. "I'm here to ask why your coordinates place my shed on county-owned easement instead of my backyard." A tiny muscle twitched near her mouth. She didn't like that. She flipped through her file too quickly, like she needed time to think. "Our contractor used professional equipment," she said, unblinking, rehearsed. I leaned forward. "Your contractor's measurements would put my fence halfway into the drainage ditch. Want to explain that?" The air went stiff. The board members sitting behind her suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Marla smoothed her blouse like she was resetting her mask. "If you dispute anything," she said, "you can file a request. Processing takes 3 to 6 months. Meanwhile, fines stand." There it was. The trap, delay, pressure, payment. But she'd miscalculated one thing. My father had taught me land rules like some men teach their sons baseball. Land doesn't lie, son. People do. His voice echoed in my memory. I walked out without another word, but my hands were shaking, not with fear, with certainty. Something was dirty here. Papers everywhere. Dad's map spread across my desk. His compass set, still accurate after 30 years. The more I overlaid the HOA's data with the real property lines, the clearer the pattern became. Marla wasn't just wrong. She was consistently wrong in the same direction. Every violation placed structures onto land that didn't belong to the HOA. Some of it didn't even belong to neighboring homes. It pointed to something deliberate, something coordinated. Are they trying to shift the map itself? But why? Night settled over the property, and the lake reflected the moon like a sheet of broken glass. I kept piecing things together until one detail punched the air out of my chest. It's noted in Dad's handwriting. Original boundary extends west. Confirm at courthouse. Keep copies safe. My pulse kicked. The west area included several of the HOA structures. And something else. Something I hadn't realized since childhood, that land had never been sold, never transferred, never subdivided. Meaning what? Meaning I might own more than just my home lot. Next morning, I went to the county recorder's office. A clerk named Sawyer pulled the old plat maps out of storage, just a yellowed real history you could feel. We compared them to the HOA filings. A chill ran down my spine. The HOA's updated map, the one they used to find me, it didn't match the county's, not even close. Sawyer frowned. This section west of your house? According to this, your father retained ownership of the entire tract. I swallowed hard. How much land are we talking about? He adjusted his glasses. Looks like roughly 40 acres. 40 acres. Not one lot. Not two. A chunk of land big enough to sit under half the neighborhood. Marla wasn't fining me because she thought I'd broken rules. She was fining me to keep me distracted. Because if I checked the records, I'd see exactly what she didn't want anyone to know. The HOA had been using my family's land for decades without legal right, and some of their houses. Their pool, their walking trail, their office, all of it stood on land that wasn't theirs. I walked out of that office into the cold morning air with a strange mix of anger and clarity. The gravel under my boots felt different, like I finally understood what I'd been walking on my whole life. This wasn't about fines. This was about land, power, control, and the one truth the HOA didn't see coming. They thought they owned me. But they'd been living on my property. Dad always said land shapes a man's backbone. Turns out it also reveals other people's intentions. The ride home from the county building felt heavier than any drive I'd taken on these roads. The steering wheel vibrated slightly under my hands, and the winter wind pushed across the open pasture, the same way it used to when Dad and I hauled lumber for the old cedar fence. 40 acres. My acres, hidden under paperwork and silence for decades. As I turned onto the gravel stretch leading to my barn, a black SUV rolled out from behind the HOA office driveway. No plates on the front, tinted windows. It lingered too long before driving off. A watcher. Sent by Marla, sent to see what I knew or what I'd do next. She's nervous. She should be. I parked, stepped out, and stared at my land with new eyes. The barn, the slope behind it, the tree line trimming the western ridge, and beyond that, the neat rows of houses the HOA bragged about in their newsletters. The ones built partly on me. I walked to Dad's old study again. The smell of dust, old leather, and wood oil instantly pulled me back into childhood. His survey maps were still spread across the desk from last night. But today, they felt like ammunition. By noon, I had a plan. I drove back into the neighborhood, not to the HOA office this time, but door to door. People needed to know the truth before Marla twisted it. First stop, the Kleins. Older couple, quiet, always waved from their porch. Their home sat partly on the disputed western tract. When I told them the HOA had used altered maps, Mr. Klein's face drained. They fined me 3 times for that shed, he muttered. Said it was too close to common area. I nodded. It wasn't common area, I said. It was mine. And you were right all along. His wife covered her mouth. You mean they lied? They used bad data, I said carefully. Or good data the wrong way. As I left, she whispered, be careful. Marla doesn't lose quietly. I know, I thought. That's what scares me. Across the street, I noticed a man watching from behind a curtain. When I knocked, he hesitated, then opened the door. Nolan, County Water Tech. Always kept to himself. You're the one challenging them, he said. I heard then, this isn't just about me. He invited me inside. His place was cluttered with tools and half-finished projects. He lowered his voice. They've been after me for years. Fines for holiday lights. Fines for keeping my truck in the driveway. Fines for leaving a hose unwound. I leaned in. Did they ever give you warnings? No. His eyes hardened. They want folks to surrender. I told him about the plat maps, about the Western Tract, about the 40 acres. He sat back like I'd punched the air from his lungs. That means the walking trail. Mine, I said. And the maintenance shed? Mine and the yes. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then he stood. I'll stand with you, whatever comes next. The weight of those words felt like something Dad would have approved of. I didn't plan on confronting Marla that day, but fate lined it up anyway. Her white sedan was parked out front. Her office blinds half open. Shadows moved behind them. I stepped inside. Her receptionist stiffened. Oh, Mr. Lane. She's in a meeting. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. Marla stepped out of her glass-walled conference room, wearing that same polished smile that never reached her eyes. Well, it isn't our most enthusiastic homeowner. One held up the county plat map. For someone enforcing boundaries, I said, you sure don't seem to understand what lines you're dealing with. Her jaw tightened. She motioned me into her office. Inside, air smelled of lavender spray and something artificial like she was covering a rotting core. She closed the door slowly, like she wanted the room sealed before the fight. What exactly do you think you've discovered? She asked. I placed the original map on her desk. This, I said. Land you've treated as HOA common area. Land you find me over. Land that belongs to my family. Her pupils narrowed. That map is outdated. I slid the county certification across the desk. The stamp isn't. For a moment, something almost like panic flickered across her face before she smothered it with arrogance. You have no idea what you're stirring up. She said, I know exactly what you're hiding. She leaned forward until our faces were inches apart. You're threatening the stability of this community. I matched her tone. You're threatening the rights of everyone living on my land. Silence. Thick, uncomfortable. She reached for her phone. I'll have our attorneys contact you. Until then, any further disruptions will be met with enforcement action. You mean fines? Her smile sharpened. Or worse. That night, headlights glowed outside my gate. Not one card. They didn't move for 10 minutes. Just sat there. Engines idling. Like a warning, Marla's pushing back. Good. Let her. I stepped onto the porch. What? Lifted the lantern Dad carved with initials and let the light hit my face. The cars pulled off fast inside the house. I laid out everything on the kitchen table: survey markers, plats, GPS printouts, HOA letters. One more document caught my eye. A note Dad had scribbled. Developer dispute unresolved. Title issues require follow-up. Dad had seen the danger. He'd tried to warn the developer. Maybe the HOA too, but someone buried it. For years. I spent the next day collecting statements, photos, dates, fines, complaints. By dusk, Nolan and 3 neighbors sat at my table. Papers spread out like we were planning a battle, and we were. Marla thought she was the storm coming. She didn't know I'd already built my shelter with evidence. Witnesses and the truth Dad left behind. The land felt alive under the moon, like it knew justice was finally waking up. Sometimes the worst battles aren't fought with fists or guns. They're fought by men who refuse to let lies rewrite the truth carved into their land. The next morning started with a sound I hadn't heard in years. Someone was knocking on my cedar fence. Not knocking. Testing it. I stepped onto the porch with my father's old thermos in hand. The cold air wrapped around me while a thin fog drifted off the lake. A man wearing a neon vest stood at the fence line, clipboard in hand. Morning, he said without turning. What are you doing on my property? He flinched. Turned slowly. Not HOA. A contractor. Shaky eyes. Nervous posture, just, marking boundaries for the HOA expansion project. Okay, that sentence hit harder than any fine. They weren't just protecting old lies. They were preparing new ones. I stepped closer. Expansion where? He pointed straight toward the western tract. The same land they had no legal right to touch. You can stop, I said. I'm paid to, you can stop, I repeated, quieter but sharper. Unless your contract includes trespassing charges. His face drained. He packed up faster than a man late for Judgment Day. As he hurried away, I whispered to myself, they're moving fast. Too fast? Marla was escalating. By noon, word spread that the HOA board had called a mandatory community meeting for that evening, a meeting they thought would corner me before that showdown. I needed proof, fresh proof. Nolan met me behind the walking trail. He had a flashlight and a folder thick enough to choke a shredder. You're going to want to see this, he said. We walked the length of the path. The winter leaves crackled under our boots. Micro detail near the bend. He pointed at a metal stake sticking out of the dirt. This wasn't here yesterday. It was a new boundary. Marker, spray painted. Fresh placed on land that according to the county and Dad's survey belonged. To me, I crouched and ran my thumb over the paint. Still tacky. Still wet? What are they planning, Nolan? He swallowed. Rumors say they want to annex the trail officially. File a claim that it's always been theirs. Annex. A word that tasted like ash. They do that, Nolan said, and half the neighborhood loses property rights. I stood, blood warming with anger. This ends tonight. The building hummed with tension before I even stepped inside. Lights too bright. Chairs arranged too perfectly. Marla's fingerprints all over it. Her board sat up front like judges waiting for a public hanging. Residents whispered, some nervous, some angry, some curious. When I walked in, conversations stopped like someone pressed mute. Marla approached the podium with that familiar tight smile. Thank you all for coming. We're here to address dangerous misinformation being spread by Mr. Lane. Dangerous. Not wrong. Not false. Dangerous. That told me everything. She motioned toward me. He has accused this association of fraud, of land theft, of corruption. These claims threaten property values and community stability. She clicked a remote. The projector lit up with a slide titled, Correct Boundaries, HOA certified their fake map. The altered one. I let her talk. Let her build her castle of lies brick by brick. Let her stand tall on it. Because I had come to knock it down when she finished. She looked at me with a slow, poisonous smirk. Would you like to respond? Yes, I said. Calm. Steady. Dad's voice echoing in my memory. Truth doesn't shout. It stands. I walked to the podium with a single folder, the one Nolan handed me. Before I begin, I said, I want to ask the community one question. I held up a small metal stake. Who placed this on the walking trail this morning? Gasps. Whispers. Marla shifted in her seat. I don't know what this stake, I said, was hammered into ground the HOA does not own. I laid out the county plat map, the annotated version, and then Dad's original with his handwritten notes. I pointed. This line, this ridge, this trail, none of it belongs to the HOA. It belonged to my father. And now it belongs to me. Residents leaned forward, confusion mixing with anger. Marla stepped up. This is outrageous, sit down, a voice shouted from the crowd. Mr. Klein? Another resident rose. Then another, I continued. For years, the HOA fined people based on false data. They altered maps. They moved lines. They claimed land the county never approved. And today I held up a photo I took earlier. They were preparing to physically change the boundaries. Murmurs turned into anger. Faces reddened. Minds clicked into place. Someone yelled, You lied to us, Marla. Her mask cracked. I acted for the community, she snapped. Her voice wavered. Her eyes blinked too fast. I stepped closer. You acted to control what was never yours. Board members stood up slowly, then publicly resigned, right there in front of everyone. One said, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't know. Another tossed his binder on the table. This is illegal. I'm done. Marla backed away from the podium, trembling. She looked smaller than she ever had, like someone watching the walls close in. You can't do this, she whispered. You can't take our land. It was never yours, I said softly. A silence hung over the room. A silence that ended the moment truth won. Outside, cold wind swept across the lot. Neighbors gathered around me, some shaking my hand, some apologizing for ever believing the HOA's lies. Nolan clapped my shoulder. You just toppled a queen, he said. I looked toward the dark ridge where the disputed trail lay. My land. The land Dad guarded quietly even after death. Justice starts slow, I thought, but once it wakes up, nothing stops it. Tomorrow the legal fight begins. But tonight the community learned who truly owned the ground beneath their feet. When truth finally stands up, even the loudest lies lose their voice.